Lonerbox, go ahead. Why is Reform UK going to destroy Britain, in your opinion?
It's a pretty simple story. It's a story about someone who is more or less making a total political killing off of his own failures. Around 2015-16, up to the Brexit campaign, Nigel Farage put out a billboard of himself standing in front of a picture of a throng of Syrian, North African, Arab Muslim refugees during the Syrian refugee crisis, and saying that this is why we need to get out of the EU. They're coming. The fact is that the overwhelming majority of them coming to the UK at that time were not Syrian. They were not North African. They weren't even outside of the EU. They were mostly EU migrants. He still managed to harness that fear, the fear of the Bataclan attacks, the rise of ISIS, the Syrian refugee crisis, and he managed to use that fear to convince people that Brexit was the answer to people's fears. Most people who voted for Brexit in that campaign thought immigration was the biggest problem. It was the biggest reason that people voted to come out of the European Union. We did. And then polling on immigration went really low. Less than 10% of people in the UK thought it was the biggest problem when it's usually like a third or a half. Until COVID happens. And then slowly after that, we get a huge surge of immigration. And for the first time ever, now that free movement is over, most migrants who come to the UK are from outside of the EU. That never used to be the case. EU migrants needed to get replaced because we had humanitarian crises, because the Conservatives, quote unquote, were taking back control and putting in immigration policy that was full of flaws and loopholes and everything else that allowed massive numbers of people to come in, to the point that we've had net migration of like close to 1 million for the last couple of years. And at the same time, also courtesy of Brexit, we had small boat arrivals on an unprecedented rise, not seen since the early 2000s. Tens of thousands of people coming in on small boats. Back in the day, we used to be able to send them back to the last European country that they came from because that was a European Union regulation. We can't do that anymore. So we basically have Conservatives trying to mess around with as many gimmicks as possible, followed up by immigration policy from the Tories that was just completely ham-fisted on student visas, work visas, you name it, to the point now that we are in a pretty unprecedented spike in immigration that is almost entirely the making of the person who is making the most profit off of it, who is Nigel Farage. So right now we have, again, the biggest problem for UK voters is immigration, and it is basically just going to open the door for a bunch of city trader, millionaire, disgusting cunts to capitalize off of people's fears of propaganda and inflated stats and misconceptions to do what they've always wanted to do, which is to use immigration as a bludgeon against everything about this country that they don't like. They want to slash welfare right, left, and center. They want to reduce taxes. Nigel Farage has for years spoken about how he wants to have an insurance-based healthcare system. We know what they want, and they're going to use people's fears to get it. And I don't really think there's anything Keir Starmer can do about immigration that is going to turn that around. It's just, that's where we are.
Drew Pavlou, what is your thoughts on Reform UK and the immigrant crisis?
So I'm actually quite party agnostic on this. If Keir Starmer were to lower migration in Britain and fix the issue, then I would support Keir Starmer, but he's not going to do that. I would support anyone who would do it. I don't really necessarily even like Nigel Farage that much. I don't even really like Reform that much. I just genuinely look at what's happening in the UK and I see how disastrous mass migration from extremely poor countries has been to the UK in terms of culture, in terms of the massive problem with rising sectarian violence in that society, the massive problem with rising Islamic extremism in that society. And I just see that, and I love Britain, and I see it's in a really terrible state right now. And so I would basically support anybody who would fix that. I know that Lonerbox started going into the whole claim that these talks about immigration are actually all cultural war distractions to try and distract people from talking about economics, and the billionaires want to distract people. Well, here's the thing. I think that people are concerned rightly that there has been massive cultural dislocation in Britain within just one generation. Even if you solved every single economic issue in the country, even if you had, say, like a Jeremy Corbyn socialist government, that would not necessarily actually solve the issue of people feeling a sense of cultural dislocation in the country that they've been brought up in. Britain has been majority British for 1,000 years, and based on current migration rates, have the British majority on track to become a minority within the late 2040s. This is obviously the largest demographic and cultural change in Britain in its entire history.
When you project a current trend into perpetuity, say an unprecedentedly high spike of net migration, which has already been cut in half within a year, if you take that and you also take into account birth rates, which are also declining for locals as well as for migrants, because when migrants come here, they actually have less babies than they would when they're in their host country. That's because, despite what a lot of people say, they do generally become a little bit more like us.
What
people in the UK have been born abroad. 16%. This is from the 2021 census.
Okay, even if that's the case, it's still massively.
Yeah, that's not massively. Remember that migrants in general are much younger. Like the average Muslim in the UK is like 20 years younger than the average Brit. We know that younger people commit more crime. So you would expect a slight overrepresentation of a few percentage points.
Okay. Why would you expect that though? Because they don't have to be in the country. So it's a question, why do you want them in the country?
You're in favor of some immigration.
Yeah, I am in favor of some level of migration. My main problem is culturally incompatible migration. So for example, most of the Middle East and North Africa is pretty incompatible to Britain in terms of migration.
In what way? In terms of when they're here? Their crime rates are about what you'd expect from a younger population. Younger people commit more crime.
Okay. Let me go through some of these stats. Freedom of information requests in the UK find North Africans are convicted for sexual offences at nearly 7 times the rate of British people, Middle Easterns at nearly 4 times the rate, Sub-Saharan Africans at nearly 3 times the rate. People from Afghanistan and Eritrea, two of the largest groups on the small boats, are more than 20 times more likely than British nationals to be convicted of sexual offences, including rape and sexual assault. Foreign nationals are more than 3 times as likely as British nationals to be arrested for sexual offences, are responsible for 2/3 of sex offence arrests in London, and are twice as likely to be arrested for all crimes as British nationals. In total, 87 nationalities in the UK have higher conviction rates for rape and other sexual offences than British nationals, and recently the British state has given out nearly 600,000 long-term visas to people from those countries. It's literally data from the Ministry of Justice. So you'll have to explain to us why the Ministry of Justice is wrong on this.
Well, it's not that they're wrong. It's that the person you're using, Centre for Migration Control, is a think tank committed to dramatically reducing migration in Britain. Really? You want me to trust these guys' word of what they heard from the ONS over the ONS itself? Why would you do that? What did they give from the Ministry of Justice? Because when you look at crime rates across ethnicities, when they break it down by nationality, it seems to be that overall, in general, for crime, including when you account for indictable offences, which are the ones that are the most serious ones, these groups are not as overrepresented as you're saying, even for indictable offences. So why would it be that in general, government data, which covers crime quite broadly, that's what you get when you look in ONS, you get crimes, you get indictable offences, you get minor offences, you get stats for that. And it seems that the representation rates are a little bit higher, which can be accounted for by them being a much younger population. So it's just weird that ONS is telling me that, but they're saying they got a freedom of information request and they found one crime in particular that has a lot more representation.
I mean, would you say that it's literally just because they're young, or do you think there is any level of cultural aspect that could lead to high rates of offending against women?
In the UK?
Yeah, do you think, for example, that like Pakistanis have a better culture for feminism and respect towards women than the UK?
Probably not, which is why their offence rates are a little bit higher from ONS.
Well, not just a little
about
bit higher.
2% higher than whites for crime in general.
I have cited to you sources that show that up to a quarter of all sexual offences in Britain are basically imported by the government through mass migration. And that is Ministry of Justice statistics, and you don't really have an answer for that.
Well, I'm asking you to explain then, why are they about equally represented on general crimes and even indictable crimes, but for some reason they are overrepresented in sexual violence? But not even against kids, because against kids, they're equally represented as well.
No, that's not even true, because for example, in the grooming gang, I mean, no, but I did point you to the fact that the Casey report showed with the grooming gangs inquiries that there was systematic shying away from recording of ethnic data in the cases, that this was a major failing. It meant that it was extremely hard to draw conclusions at a national level. It did say that the report found in 3 areas, Greater Manchester, South Yorkshire and West Yorkshire, disproportionate numbers of men from Pakistani background were suspects for group-based sex trafficking.
They found that, and you'll also acknowledge that the Casey report said that this was from places where there were high-profile instances of a quite rare crime in the country, which means, like the mafia, for example, if you have a exceptional kind of crime and a rare kind of crime, a subset of a subset of a subset of a crime, then yeah, if you go to a place where there's a high-profile case, you're going to see skewed data. And Casey said that, and you ignored that. I don't know why you didn't mention that. Casey said that that is not applicable to the country. For the country, for sexual violence, the one where you have data from the entire country, for CSA, again, they are about equally represented.
Well, I don't know if it's equally represented, because I do have statistics from the Ministry of Justice that you haven't responded to that show that they're up to 1/3 of sexual assaults.
I have responded to it.
No, you just said that you don't believe it.
Is that all I said? Did I not tell you why there was maybe an issue with that?
It's Ministry of Justice statistics. Okay?
No, it's not.
They provided the number of convictions for sexual assault on a female across England and Wales in the year 2024, and then they broke down the number of people who were foreign nationals.
I mean, they're telling you that they've done that, right? But they don't actually have the ONS raw data there, because ONS has raw data. You can go and find it publicly. I don't know why you would go with like taking the word off of a think tank that's goal is to reduce dramatically migration. I don't know why you would do that over just looking at the ONS with the data that we have nationwide. We have nationwide data on so many different subsets of arrest, indictable conviction. We have all of that, but you're just choosing the one that you prefer, the one that makes you happier. In any case, if your issue was crime, wouldn't your issue be with Windrush, with the black population in the UK more than the Muslim population? Because their crime rates across the board, and including in indictable crimes, are actually quite a bit higher. Why focus on Muslims?
But I think there's more problems overall with the Islamic community, because there's also terrorism to consider as well. There's also
terrorism counts as crime. I think it's like 1% of Muslim prisoners are in jail for terrorism.
So what? Like, there shouldn't even be one in the country. Why would there be anyone in the country who's a terrorist?
I don't know. Why do we have like local white terrorists? Why do we have like Darren Osborne running his vehicle into a mosque and killing people? Like, why do we have that? You know, of course, for any population, you're going to have violence. Yeah.
Yeah, but like, why would you choose to bring in a population that commits terrorism at a pretty high rate?
What do you mean a pretty high rate? Sorry, do you have like ONS data on terrorism rates from Muslim immigrants as well?
I mean, to just literally point to all the recent terrorist attacks that we've seen in Britain. Like, for example,
that's not stats. That's not statistics. 7/7 was like almost 20 years ago. We have serial killers. We have like Fred West. We have Jimmy Savile. We have like, what are you talking about?
But here's a difference, Lonerbox. There are British native-born serial killers and evil people, yes, but it's a choice to then import people who do that into your country from a foreign nationality.
So this is from the article that you linked, Drew. Fact-checking Farage's numbers here says, our estimates conclude that Afghans are closer to 3 times more likely to be convicted of sexual offense than someone born in the UK, rather than 22 times. Yeah. Although limitations to the data, which we will explain later on, mean that it is not currently possible to accurate conclusion.
Yeah, because do you know how many Afghans who were convicted in the space of 2 years that they based this data on? 77. That's 77 too many. That's going to be your response.
That is
Out
literally
of how many Brits who were convicted of sexual violence at the same time? 14,270.
Like, can you explain though, like, why would you want to have 77 people who are rapists from a foreign nationality in your country?
Probably because, in terms of any decision that we make, whether or not when we choose to allow certain communities that are more crime-ridden to have babies instead of aborting them and doing eugenics, the same reason that we do immigration, you're saying that because a non-zero number of these people commit crimes, that's a reason to keep them all out of the country? Irish people committed a lot of crime when they came here.
But at a much lower rate.
Hang on, Drew, did you just say that the rate of Irish immigrants coming to the UK in the 18th was much lower than the rate of Muslims today for crime?
No, I didn't say that. I mean,
okay, you walk it back, that's fine. Okay, good, because that was fucking mental.
Okay.
What are you talking about? This data came from 77 Afghans.
77 rapists, yes. And?
So even if out of 1 million Muslims, if 77 of them are rapists, you want to, as an excuse to keep them all out?
77.
No, if it were out of the Afghan population, because between 2021 and 2023, we had quite a few thousand Afghans come to the UK because of the refugee crisis. So when you're saying that 77 is enough to exclude an entire nation, then you would exclude any nation. You'd exclude Poles for that.
You're familiar with the fact that the vast majority of sexual offences in Britain are never result in conviction.
So you can just make up the stats?
No, but that is true though. It is very hard to get rape convictions.
Yeah, and that means that the rate from everyone would be higher, doesn't it?
Yes.
We're trying to talk about proportionality, which is why I don't know why you wouldn't just stick to, because we have very reliable across the entire nation stats on crime, arrest rates, conviction rates, and indictable crimes, which are the worst crimes. We have stats by nation for all of these crimes, but you want to go on to the one that's like more opaque and harder to report and harder to get access to figures to when you have to limit your sample to 77 Afghans. Why not just go with the crime rates that are sweeping across the entire nation that you can just get on ONS without doing a freedom of information request or anything else? Because it doesn't give you the answer that you want.
Why is it that people in Britain have to be raped by foreigners? Why is it the case?
Why is it that people in Glasgow have to get fucking knife threats from people born in Carlton? Because we could really just not allow those families to give birth, couldn't we?
Unfortunately, there is always going to be a native-born criminal element. That will always happen.
And there's always going to be a foreign-born criminal element, isn't there?
But it's not necessarily the case that you have to bring foreigners into your country from places of the world that are very culturally dissimilar to you.
So it's about culture. You don't care about the crime rates, especially if you count for their age. The crime rates are not that different.
Significant.
No, they're not. Show me the crime rates are significant.
So this article that I linked, even though it says that Nigel Farage was wrong that it was up to 22 times higher, it's still multiple times higher. And so the question is, why would you have any times higher?
The grooming gangs, they commit similar crimes to us because taking young girls into a car with alcohol and drugs, that's what locals do in the UK.
No, it's not fucking insane.
You don't live in the UK, Drew. You have not grown up in the UK. You don't know.
Lonerbox. It is literally a fact that some of the ringleaders who were convicted in court screamed in court that they did it because the girls were white British.
Yes, because someone screamed at a girl calling her a white slag in court. That does not change the overall nature of the crime.
They literally admitted that it was racially based. They said, we did this because the white British raised their kids as sluts.
Okay, so that changes the entire nature of the crime then. Believe it or not, and this is probably why all the people who write these reports did not say that, Drew, the professionals who actually understand these criminals and these people and the victims, people abuse and rape for the same reason that every ethnic group does it generally. It's because they think they can get away with it. It's because they like power. It's because we're fucking animals at the end of the day.
I'm going to read the quote. "We are the supreme race, not these white bitches," pointing to the police officers in court. "You were born 1,000 years too late. You fucked my community. None of us did that. White people trained those girls to be so much advanced in sex. They were coming without hesitation to wherever," and later pointed to Rachel Smith, who prosecuted both cases, saying, "I curse you at night. I curse you and your family. You will understand," pointing at Judge Kokar. "I curse the juries. I curse the media. And most of you bitches, your family will get it."
So he's not actually saying, "I did this because." He's not like declaring a motive for a hate crime. It also says one of those convicted addressed. It doesn't even say that this was the leader. So you lied about two things there. I don't know why you can't just quote.
I didn't lie about it.
You did. You embellished it. You literally added in words. What are you talking about? You think this quote demonstrates that this is a hate-motivated crime rather than a sexual opportunist-motivated crime?
Well, this is what he said.
Answer the question.
Here's the judge in the Liverpool trial. Clifton dismissed the gang claim that there was no racial or cultural element to their crimes. He said one of the factors leading to the abuse of their victims was the fact that they were not part of your community or religion.
What's the context of that quote? The reason that was said, and the reason that's why they are categorized as sexual opportunists, is because when they were doing what they were doing, they were driving around, they were looking for girls to prey on. They did it at night in a place where most of the people were white and where Muslim girls were, or other ethnicities were mostly going to be indoors at that time. They were sexual opportunists. They targeted those people because, yes, you're right, they looked down on them, but also because they were there. That's why. It's not minimizing, by the way, for chat. That you are so desperate to act as if this guy wouldn't have done it were it not like a white victim because it's motivated by racial superiority as a hate crime.
The judge said that.
The judge did not say that a racial element is not a hate crime. So why didn't the judge make it a hate crime?
I don't know why the judge didn't make it a hate crime. All I know is that
because maybe that would be too explosive. You could say it's got a racial element.
These guys weren't necessarily given the book jail for 19 years. He's already going to be out in about 8 years' time. It should have been life in prison at the very least. I mean, in Australia, we had a grooming gang case in Sydney, and basically they got life in prison.
So is that an immigration issue or is that a criminal justice issue? You understand that's a criminal justice issue, right? Not an immigration one.
I mean, yeah, but the only reason they're in the country is because of immigration. So it is an immigration issue. Of course it is.
£10 from Average Joe to say, "I'm worried, as a secular Brit, the projected increase of Islam in the UK long term. Much more socially conservative, less women's rights. Where Islam is the majority, it dominates culture, and society. Response to that, Lonerbox?
Britain is currently 6.5% Muslim. We were, 4% Muslim 15 years ago? Their birth rates within the country are dropping. We have pretty strict standards for immigration now. Obviously, being in the EU might have been better if you wanted migrants to be more similar to us. But, you can thank Nigel Farage for that, the guy that is probably going to be Prime Minister next. Again, we've had immigration waves before from groups that were significantly different from us. When the Irish came to the UK, they were very different from us. They were so different that we had sectarian riots. They were literally perceived as a distinct race. They were seen as a different race by the people who lived here. Even when I made that joke about sectarian violence in the UK and you acting like that's new, and I laughed, and you didn't even know why I was laughing. You clearly don't know anything about this country that you've just taken an interest in.
It's so much more culturally dissimilar. I still think that Islamic migration to Britain is much more culturally dissimilar than Irish migration to Britain. So even Irish people seen as irredeemably foreign, it took 200 years for them to assimilate, then how do you think it's going to work with Somali Islamic extremists?
Well, it didn't take 200 years for them to assimilate. And also, I'm still yet to see the evidence that any majority of British Muslims are not assimilated. The overwhelming majority of them are not committing terror attacks.
Oh, so true, dude. So true. Very assimilating.
No, qualify it then instead of giggling like a little fucking fanny. Like, oh, tell me.
You know, a majority of British Muslims basically think that there were no atrocities on October 7th.
Do you know that white leftists in the UK think that as well?
Yeah, they're unfortunately part of the country. Of course, you're always going to get white leftists.
So if we're talking about assimilation, is that not then like assimilating to what is like already like a white leftist view in the UK?
No, because they're being motivated by Islamic extremism. They're not motivated by white leftism.
How do you know that? That it's by Islamic extremism? Have you seen the way that these protesters talk, even the Muslim ones? Some of them talk with Islamic language. A lot of them talk with secular language. A lot of them talk with Soviet-style propaganda on Israel.
It's tribal.
Tribal is not the same as motivated by Islamic extremism. And you'll notice, by the way, that the majority of them do what about that? They protest hate crimes, but like the majority of them...
I've got the data. Half of all British Muslims think homosexuality should be illegal.
I have a question for both of you. What does it mean to be British? I'll give you the mic first to you, Drew.
I think Britain is a nation that has existed essentially for 1,000 years. There is an ethnic component to it. Doesn't mean that people can't assimilate and be culturally British and stuff like that, but there is an ethnic component. And I think it would be regrettable if the English people ethnically were a minority of England after 1,000 years.
What is an example of someone who's assimilated to be culturally British? What would that look like?
I think you would basically need them to be willing to die for the country, to defend the country. And you have to basically have your first loyalty to Britain above, for example, religious or sectarian interests. And you have Islamic extremists in Britain like Mohammed Hijab or Dili Hussein who very openly say that their allegiance is to Islam and not to Britain. So that's a huge problem.
Lonerbox, same question to you. What does it mean to be British?
I don't really think about issues like that all that much. I'd rather just think about what kind of policies can help people, what we can do to improve the economy and the healthcare system, and to have fairness, to have low crime rates so people can be safe, to have like some kind of level of sense of community for people. When people talk about how we need to be more culturally British, I mean, Drew kind of gave the game away right at the beginning. It really just boils down to them wanting to have an ethnic makeup for its own sake.
I mean, Israel has an ethnic makeup.
Not for its own sake. Israel has an ethnic makeup because it's surrounded by people that would otherwise ruin them. Like, Jews cannot survive as a minority in that region.
Yeah, and I don't think it would be good for the English people if they were a minority in England either.
White English people are a minority in London. Are they like fucked because of that? Well, in the same way that Jews would be if they were a minority in the Middle East?
Maybe not as bad as Israeli Jews being a minority in the Middle East, but I still think that there's been some pretty bad changes in London. There's terrible cases of terrorism. There's terrible cases of Islamic extremism. There's terrible incidents of crime. People feel culturally alienated and atomized. I want you to explain why it would be a good thing for English people to be a minority in England.
I don't think there's a good or bad thing about an ethnic makeup changing for its own sake.
It is an observable fact that this current policy is changing things, and you have to try to justify why that's a good thing.
Because otherwise, we are a country that has an aging population. Its population is set to get lower without migration. We cannot sustain a national health service, a growing economy, with a shrinking population, or with an aging population. Because again, you tell me then, what is one developed, successful country in the world that's a liberal democracy that doesn't take in fairly high numbers of immigration?
Japan, literally Japan.
You want to be like Japan?
Japan is much better than Britain right now. It has higher GDP per capita, lower inequality, less crime, less terrorism. In so many different ways, Japan is literally superior to Britain right now.
Japan is not superior to Britain right now. Japan's had economic issues for the last like 3 decades. Their debt is like spiraling. Japan is like
their economy is literally better than Britain.
Do you understand that Japan is currently increasing migration because they cannot sustain their state
at a very low rate?
It's at a low rate because people lose their shit whenever migrants come to Japan. People freak the fuck out.
Which is good. I want Japan to remain a Japanese society
for the sake of them becoming an aging population and not being able to sustain anything that they've currently got and having a tanking economy.
It's better than Japan basically becoming culturally unrecognizable. Nations can recover from war. Nations can recover even from 2 atomic bombs on their cities, but they can't recover from being completely ethnically terraformed. The demographics just changing forever.
So for the sake of demographics, really, you would have a shrinking economy. Yes. You would have a tanking welfare state.
Dude, the British welfare state is tanking right now as we speak. The economy in Britain is so bad. You've had the Boris wave, and it's not leading to any economic growth at all.
The Boris wave was because of horrible mismanagement of immigration, quite a lot of which has been reversed. I don't know if you're satisfied by that.
It's sad if English people are no longer a majority in the capital that they founded.
London was founded by Romans, but okay, give me an answer that's not just because, please.
Because I'm going to go into this. I think it's bad if English people become a minority in the country that is their homeland.
That's a circular answer again. Why?
In the same way that I think it would be bad if Jewish people were a minority in Israel.
What? Because they'll get genocided.
Well, I think there could be a genocide of white English people in Britain in about 50, 60 years' time if there was to be a massive, massive rise in the population of Islamic extremists in Britain. There are tens of thousands of them. There are 35,000 people on the terror watch list. They want to kill people. They're very open about it. They go out and they kill people. And how many terrorist attacks have occurred already as a result of Islamic extremism? We're both Zionists, correct? So let's talk about this. Do you agree with me that...
To be clear, we talk about defending Israel. I defend Israel insofar as that I think people trying to destroy it are bad for everyone. You defend Israel because you have a bone to pick with Muslims. I don't suppose it's part of that think tank that's about destroying...
Are you mentally ill? You're literally mentally ill. Lonerbox, you are literally extremely mentally ill because I've actually been one of the highest profile supporters of Israel's right to exist on social media over the past couple of years. And you're saying, oh, well, you don't care about Jews. You're only doing it because you hate Muslims. No, dude, that's actually extremely offensive. And it's actually really evil of you to say that. How about have some gratitude to me? There are so many young people right now who literally want to kill Jews everywhere.
This is just going to be an emotional rage. It's always this, though. It's always just like
But it's true, though. Have some fucking gratitude. Look at how people have treated the Jews over the past couple of years. I'm actually an ally of the Jewish people, and you're just like, oh, you only care about Jews because you hate Muslims. That's extremely offensive. I put my neck on the line. I got so many death threats from Hamas supporters and stuff like that over the past 2 years. And then you say, oh, you don't care about Jews. You're only doing it because you hate Muslims. That's extremely offensive. Like, how dare you, honestly?
I mean, you literally just asserted there's like a higher murder problem of Muslims in the UK as well. I don't suppose that your Centre for Migration Control that is definitely not partisan. I don't suppose they gave you stats on that, did they? I thought we were agreeing that in overall crime, as well as the more severe crimes, that Muslims were about equally represented, slightly more, mostly because they're younger.
I think that the English people should remain a majority in England. I think it's similar to the fact that I want Jews to be a majority in Israel, because I think that terrible things can happen when people become minority groups.
Apart from like the immigrants, I guess, becoming minority groups.
Of course the immigrants are minority groups because they're immigrating to a country that is a different country to theirs. Of course.
Yeah, but my point is that it's not a tragedy to be a minority inherently, is it?
It can be a tragedy if you're a majority and you become a minority.
But not if you go to a country and you are a minority as a migrant. Like, it seems like you want to put our economic well-being and our healthcare system and our welfare system behind the demographic and the aesthetic of the country.
Not even the aesthetic of the country, just the cultural continuity of the nation. In the context of Australian politics, for example, I care more about the fact that in 60, 70 years' time, my children would live in a culturally recognizable Australia. I care about that more than, for example, debates over whether tax should be raised 2% or lowered 2%. Because the essential cultural continuity of the nation is something that's very important to me. And I think it would be bad.
Or about whether or not we can have a functioning healthcare system for our old people.
Okay, Lonerbox. What do you think is a more important question in Israeli politics? Whether the tax rate should be raised 2 or 3%?
I don't know why you keep trying to appeal to Israel. Israel is a country with so much more unique challenges than the UK. Like you know full well that Jews do not have the same experience with demographics as fucking white people in England. It is not a comparable experience. Why are you doing that?
Because we're both Zionists. I'm appealing to a common sense here.
Do you think I'm Jewish, Drew?
I know you're a Zionist, so we're both Zionists.
A Zionist in what sense? In what? That I think Israel shouldn't be destroyed? That's as far as it goes for me.
I'm the same. That's the same with me too.
So just because I think Israel shouldn't be destroyed because Jews are in a very unique position in the world does not mean that I'm going to tremble at the thought of like demographics shifting in somewhere like the UK, as they already have in certain cities. Because if you're going to talk about demographics, to me demographics is just it's your national origin. It can be about culture and preferences, but you'd have to show me why there is a specific reason why this or that demographic can't be a minority. I can make that case very clear for Jews.
I actually didn't realize this Lonerbox. Sorry, I genuinely thought you were Israeli, but you're Lebanese instead. Sorry, I didn't realize.
We all look the same, man.
Well, I'm Cypriot.
I don't see color.
We're literally Levantine.
$5 from General Grievous to say, Drew, I'm part Jewish, and I want you to think of the cruel, retarded irony of turning refugees and boats around. This happened in the 30s. They were murdered.
No, it's so different.
Why is it so different?
Because refugees at Calais are safe in France. They're not going to be murdered in France.
So it's about safety. Which safe country can an Afghan refugee go into Australia?
First, they're safe in Indonesia.
It's not a safe country. They go into detention centers and they rot and they get tortured. It's not a safe country for asylum seekers.
Well,
there aren't ones.
They shouldn't be coming to.
So you don't care about them going to a safe country. You just want them out of your country. Just say that. Just say you are happy to let them fucking rot in Indonesian detention centers where they have no future, no asylum, no processing, nothing, fucking subject to all kinds of criminal gangs, smugglers, human traffickers. You are fine with that so long as they don't come to Australia. It's 20,000 a year. Kill yourself, you fucking prick. Jesus Christ.
Oh, you're fucking retarded. You're actually mentally ill. It's not my responsibility in Australia to randomly take in refugees.
Good, just say that. Yeah, then don't pretend to care about them going to a safe country.
I want them to go to a safe country.
Well, no, you don't. The closest safe country for Rohingya is Australia. That's the closest safe country.
Well, no, that's actually not true. China's a party to the refugee convention. They can go to China.
Hold on, a Uyghur that
Rohingya Muslims can go to China.
Persecuted in China and is trying to feel
Fuck me.
A Uyghur Muslim fleeing the genocide in China. Should they go?
I would Uyghur Muslims in because I like them.
Yeah, because they're enemies of the people you don't like. That's why. But not Rohingya Muslims who are being murdered by Myanmar and China.
We can take in some limited numbers of Rohingya Muslims, and we actually have.
But you support blocking them. You support turning their boats back and tugging them over to Indonesia and potentially drowning them as well, because you do acknowledge that people have drowned in these operations, right? You do acknowledge that, right? That in pushbacks, if some people fall over and drown, right? You acknowledge that.
No, people smugglers are trying to human traffic. The people smugglers must not be allowed to do that. They're putting people's lives at risk by putting them on these extremely dangerous boats, and you think that it's fine to just allow these people to keep on coming and create the incentive for the boats to keep on continuing.
The actual incentive is that it's either risk your life on a boat or it's stay in Indonesia and also risk your life and being kept in a dungeon.
Indonesia is fine.
It's not safe.
An Afghan refugee is much safer in Indonesia than they are in Afghanistan.
In an Indonesian detention center. So yes, to you would rather they stayed in Indonesian detention centers.
Tell Indonesia to reform their policy then. I encourage Indonesia to take in more refugees.
So not your problem.
They're the largest Muslim majority country on earth. They should take in more Muslim refugees.
Yeah, so not your problem, right?
It's not Australia's problem. Ask Indonesia to reform their policy.
And if they don't, just leave them there. Leave them to rot.
No, it's not my responsibility to take in the entire...
Why are you saying no? Why can't you own a position? You literally would rather these people get fucking tortured in Indonesian detention centers than come to Australia. You'd rather that. You prefer that.
Mental. You see Indonesia torturing people, and your idea is not to tell Indonesia to reform that policy. Your policy is instead to go, no, Australia, take them in.
So between the time it takes to actually get Indonesia to reform, do they come to Australia or not?
No, you should.
So you'd rather they get tortured? Thank you. Yes. I don't know why you can't own that. No. There's not a third option.
Jews are fleeing the Nazis, and they arrive at your door. Do you have a moral responsibility to let them in?
Indonesia is not the Holocaust. Indonesia is not Nazi Germany. It is the largest Muslim majority country on earth, and it is a democracy. Tell Indonesia to change their policies.
But until they do change their policy, would you rather they stayed in those detention centers?
No, your idea is that until Indonesia reforms its policies, that Australia should have open borders. No,
Australia should have vetting. Do you acknowledge that over 80% of small boat arrivals from Australia succeeded in their asylum applications? They were legitimate. Of course they were. They came from Syria and Iran and Afghanistan and Iraq. Of course they had successful applications. They were legitimate refugees.
Still, 20% failed.
It was like 12% that failed, and they got deported.
Yeah, good. I hope they are deported.
How is that your instinct? What about the other ones? The ones who succeeded? Is it bad that they stayed?
If they did end up getting vetted and they were not a threat to anybody, then I'm okay with them being here.
But these are the people that you want to push back on the boats.
Well, we have to have a policy that is strict so that more people don't come into the future.
So you don't want the people on small boats who succeeded in application. You'd rather they had not made it.
No, well, the people that already made it, then we have to process them, but we want to try to stop them from coming in the future.
But it would be better. It'd be better if they hadn't made it. It'd be better if they'd got fucked in Yemen, right? Or stayed in Iraq or stayed in Afghanistan, right?
Well, it would be better if they found safe asylum in another country.
Obviously, it would be better if they found safe asylum in another country, but obviously they didn't. That's why they end up in Australia.
They could go to Cambodia. Cambodia is a signatory to the UN Convention. They should have done that.
Cambodia for what? Rohingya Muslims? You might as well be saying the Muslims are fine going to China because they're part of the Refugee Convention.
But Cambodia is a party to the Refugee Convention, and it's right next to Myanmar, so they can...
So do you think Rohingya Muslims can't flee China because China is part of the Refugee Convention? Like, why would they need to flee?
I'm offering Cambodia as a safe asylum, dude. It's right next to Myanmar.
Why do you think they don't stay in Cambodia?
They want to come to Australia because it's a wealthier country than Cambodia.
Are you sure?
A lot of the cases, yes.
Can you think of any other reasons?
Yeah, Australia's a more attractive country than Cambodia. I'm aware of that fact.
That's not the only reason, okay? Like, Cambodia is also quite rough on Rohingya Muslims, but whatever.
Well, Papua New Guinea is party to the convention, so they could go to Papua New Guinea potentially.
Have you seen how people were treated in Papua New Guinea from the offshore processing? Australia paid for that, by the way, because Australia is basically paying these countries to take the load off them, basically. That's actually a problem as well. It's like when you are trying to send someone who's coming to your border away, you kind of need the consent of the other country to do it. That's why you said you care about people smugglers. Well, we know that Operation Sovereign Borders people, because of whistleblowers, have actually been paying smugglers just to take people back, because it's otherwise they stay in the middle of the sea and drown. We know that when Australia was trying to offshore process people in Nauru and Manus Island, they had to pay for that to happen. It actually cost them millions of dollars per person to keep them there. It was more expensive than putting them in a fucking 5-star hotel in Australia. And what was the result of that again? Where are most of those asylum seekers now? Oh, they had to get medically evacuated to Australia. They're in Australia right now. It was a fucking failure.
Look, at the end of the day, it did stop overall the boats, though, because...
And that's what matters. Yeah, that's what matters. Keep them out. Yeah, I know. I understand.
Well,
I can't imagine the problem that we would have if we just decided to make what would easily be millions of people stateless and just leave them wandering the earth looking for something to do. Typically, statelessness is bad. Bin Laden was made stateless. Stateless refugee camps, people in Syria and in the Rohingya camps in Bangladesh. These are the countries that take most of the refugees. Most of the refugees in the world are in places like Iran, Bangladesh. They're in Jordan, Turkey. They're in neighboring countries. The people who come to Europe and Australia are a tiny minority of the world's refugees. As the wealthy countries of the world, as the countries that at one point in time made a lot of our wealth off of exploiting the rest of the planet, I think it is a fairly modest humanitarian thing. No, it's a modest humanitarian thing, because the alternative is you have stateless people everywhere. Stateless people are not good. Stateless people are dangerous. Stateless people are the easiest people in the world to recruit and radicalize. ISIS thrived off of people who were made stateless by the Syrian civil war and by the conflicts in Afghanistan and around the Middle East. Like, those groups love statelessness. To answer the question about safe first country, the reason that exists exists nowhere in the Refugee Convention. And actually, the reason the Refugee Convention quite clearly acknowledges that there should be international cooperation on the issue of burden sharing is because if you just allow the neighboring country and force them to take in all the asylum seekers from whatever crisis or war is happening next door, then you are actually imposing massive, arbitrary, disproportionate burdens on single countries. The only way that we can deal with the issue of global refugees is by taking a share of the burden, because otherwise you have issues of massive build-up of stateless people who are ripe for radicalization, who are ripe for militarization. And generally, just as a humanitarian, it's a good thing to do. That's why Drew is so desperately uncomfortable to admit that he would rather a Rohingya Muslim go into an Indonesian detention center and face conditions tantamount to torture than arrive in Australia.
Their policy, for fuck's sake.
Oh, just ask them. Oh, I forgot we could just ask Indonesia to improve their policy. I forgot about that. What do you think? He'll go to the left next? No, he won't. Drew Pavlou has basically decided that he is going to model his entire career now, like getting the maximum number of Elon Musk tweets, which is a shame. I think at one point he was kind of like lefty, liberal, whatever, and then he kind of got alienated by a few friends who support October 7th, and I guess he just lost his mind over it. And now his only validation comes from Elon Musk retweeting him, which is a shame because, whatever you're looking for in life, Elon Musk retweets is not it. It doesn't really do anything for you. It's no purpose.
I don't really get why an Australian would be so adamant about immigration policy in the UK.
Because they always do this. Like, they always have these the post-it note bullet point of each different country. It's just that classic, we're very liberal, but also here's the most deranged, fucking unprecedentedly right-wing immigration policy camp. The populists, yeah, all those vibes. Bizarre, man.
I thought that was really interesting when you brought up the fact about Indonesia having really like horrible detention centers, and then Drew just didn't really have a response to that. I thought that kind of showed his callousness,
Mm-hmm. It's the unwillingness to admit it as well. It's just like, fuck me.
I know, that was super frustrating. I don't really understand like how he fell from being such a liberal advocate. He doesn't really explain it very well.
Because Elon Musk retweets him sometimes, and he has no fucking identity, and he's kind of stupid, and he just needs to fill that fucking hole. And he probably got bullied by too many lefties on the internet, so he just feels kind of like destroyed and beaten like a wounded fucking deer. And he needs to find his wings, and he can't do it himself because he lacks the inner fortitude. He can't handle people hating him, so he needs to have a new little fucking coddle space, and Elon Musk is offering that to him, so there we go. Change all your opinions.
You should be grateful for me being a Zionist. You should be grateful for me defending Jews. And I thought you were Jewish. He was like, be grateful for me, Jew boy.
Yeah, that felt a lot weirder. I thought he was saying that as like, oh, there aren't many people like us out there or whatever. I didn't know he was saying that I should be grateful because he thought I was Jewish. That's insane, man. That's fucking mental. Yeah, he was saying that I should be grateful for his positions on Israel. Like, Jesus Christ, man. What the fuck?